Hi, I'm Coach Corey Wayne, and this is my video coaching newsletter. And the topic of today's newsletter is going to be why over pursuing turns her off. I've got 3 really good emails I'm going to go through with you today. You should be able to learn a bunch from each of them, especially the first one. The guy really did a good job of detailing his mindset mistakes as well as the actual mistakes he made to turn this woman off he was dating. Now, normally, when somebody tells me they read my book 10 to 15 times and been following me for several years, you get some really good success stories. And despite that, this guy just did not exercise emotional self-control and kind of totally lost his shit. And he admits it, which is good because obviously in self-reflection, he's able to not only see where he was going wrong, but he knew it at the time as soon as he was making mistakes. So hopefully the goal is that you read, as I go through it, you're able to see what he did wrong so you don't duplicate the same behavior. So with that said, I got a quote that I'm going to read that I wrote for this topic, and then we're going to go through the first guy's email. So the quote says, "When we love and value ourselves, we tend to demonstrate confidence, certainty, and decisiveness. When we don't think very highly of ourselves, we tend to try too hard to make friends and date those we have interest in. Men who feel this way tend to call, text, and force too much interaction too soon due to their feelings of potential loss and scarcity. This causes them to fail tests of their strength and self-respect by the women they have interest in. When a man won't stand up for himself, women are repulsed by this unattractive beta male behavior. Set and enforce healthy boundaries with all people in your life. Respect must be earned before it is given. Women will never love men they don't respect." Let's go through the first guy's email. It says, "Hey Coach, I'm a big fan. I've been following you for 2 years and have listened to your audiobook well over 15 times. As you will see, this message, however, I failed to stick to the principles out of fear of loss and fear of not being good enough." Remember, our 2 primary fears are fear that we're not enough, in other words, fear that we don't have what it takes, and fear that we won't be loved and accepted by our friends, family, and peer group. And obviously, right here, he's able to self-diagnose and realize, I let these fears overwhelm me. So it's good that he recognizes it, because that's how you get better. You got to be able to self-diagnose and be honest with yourself and your mistakes. "I started going out with a girl who works in my building a couple of months back. I never really saw her as I'm a carpenter working in the penthouse unit, whereas she works night shift at the front desk. But one day I walked in and invited her to a show I'm playing. I have a band. And she said she might be able to go, so I got her number and told her that I'd text her the details as I got closer to the date. 3 days later, I texted her and we made a date. On the date, I was infatuated with her beauty, and I will admit, I put her on a pedestal. Not good. Come on, man. 15 times, you should definitely know better. And if you like these mugs, you can get these at Teespring, if you're so inclined." He says, "I will say this, though. I have gone out with a lot of beautiful girls, but this one was a lot harder to read." Well, probably because you put her on a pedestal. "And she wasn't acting like you wanted her to, and so you just go, no, yeah, she's hard to read." Well, obviously, if you read the book 15 times, you know what to look for. But the reality is, this is probably comes as a result of not practicing enough. And this is what happens. You meet a girl who, in your eyes, is maybe a unicorn to you, and you lose your shit. Because when you're with somebody like that, and I've talked about this many times in the past, it's like you get about 2 to maybe 3 unicorns a decade. And this is from a guy who basically, I'm in my 5th decade now. Or I should say, I just finished my 5th decade. I'm going into my beginning of my 6th decade of living, I guess, as you put it. But, I mean, that's the reality. And when you screw up with somebody you really like, and it's going to be a long time before somebody else comes along that stirs your soul and makes you feel something, and who also, you can tell, feels a similar level of attraction, at least initially. And then when you see that dissipate and she no longer has any interest in you, it's just the worst fucking feeling, because you just know. You know that you've kind of lost the plot. It's not fun, but this is why I share these, so we can all learn from these and hopefully not make the same mistakes. Regardless, at the end of the date, I walked her to the front door and kissed her goodnight. After I got home, I got uncertain and texted her saying I just got home and that I had a great time. He says I knew not to, but I did it anyway. Now remember, this is not necessarily the end of the world. If the girl has high interest, you could probably get away with things like this. But a woman whose interest is really low, remember, it's a scientific fact that women are more attracted to men whose feelings are unclear. And if you're just barely hanging on by your fingernails and you start texting, oh, I had a really great time, and things like this, little things like that, it's a little too much pursuit, a little too much too soon, shows you're a little too eager. You start to give off that vibe that you might be one of those needy, clingy guys that she eventually has to block, because pretty much most women have had probably dozens of guys like that they've interacted with, and as soon as you give off that vibe, the lower her attraction for you, the less you can make those mistakes and still have a shot with her. She responded immediately saying she was just about to text me, but said she had a great time too. And that's the kind of thing you're thinking, God, I should have just waited a few minutes. The next night, she reached out to me again, so I made another date a week in advance. So obviously, this girl's really into him. A couple of days later, she reached out again, and this is where I think I really fucked up. I figured, oh well, she's pursuing me, so I can reach out to her more. Well, remember, as I talk about in 3% Man, the goal is to kind of start the ball rolling with the courtship, asking her out, going out on dates, starting out with 1 date a week, because as her attraction level grows, you're going to see more of this behavior, this more texting and more calling. And the way you're supposed to respond that I talk about in the book is, especially if she's texting you every couple of days, that's typically something that happens 2-3 weeks into the courtship. Now, if this has happened after like the first week or so, your pursuit for the most part is going to be over, and it actually becomes counterproductive if she's reaching out to you every 2 or 3 days and you start reaching out more. What happens is the more you start reaching out when a woman's pursuing you this heavily in the beginning, you'll notice that over time she'll actually start reaching out less, and that's an indication that her attraction is going down instead of up. But again, it's obvious this woman has pretty high interest in him to start with, so he can get away with these mistakes. At least right now he can. This is where I think I really fucked up. I figured, oh well, she's pursuing me so I can reach out to her more. Now notice what he says next. As the days got closer to our next date, her texts got shorter, and sometimes she would drop off mid-conversation. See what I mean? The day of the date came, and all went well, and a couple hours into making out and feeling up on each other, I invited her to my place. She came over, and we had sex. Obviously, he was able to, despite the fact he was doing things that were causing a noticeable loss in attraction, meaning she wasn't as enthusiastic to text and reach out as she had been, it still wasn't too much to ruin it. So she came over, they hooked up, things are progressing. Before I drove her home, she asked what I was doing tomorrow. I said, I don't have plans, what about you? She said that she had a dinner plans with a cousin, so I said, no worries, go do that, and if you're free after, come on over. I wouldn't suggest something like that. Remember, it'd be much better if she reached out and said, hey, I got done early with my cousin, what are you up to? I was like, oh, well, I just got home from hanging out with friends, why don't you come on over? She said she'd let me know. The next morning she texted me, thanks for all the surprises, and to have a great day with a bunch of kissy emojis. So I responded, you're welcome, let me know if you're free later. She never did. I know I fucked up by not making definite plans, and the next day I became uncertain again and invited her over to help me make dinner. So now, remember, he said, hey, reach out if you can get together. And she didn't. And so what does he do? He reaches out the next day. So he's starting to over-pursue now. Instead of just saying, hey, well, she didn't text me, so I'll just wait, and if I don't hear from her by next week, I'll reach out to her again. Because again, remember, women are like cats. They kind of come and go, and they're unpredictable, and they don't act exactly the same every week. That's why it's more of an art to implement the things I talk about in 3% Man, which obviously you can read for free at understandingrelationships.com. All you got to do is subscribe to the email newsletter. So he said he invited her over to help him make dinner. He got no response from her. The next night, she told me that while she loves spending time with me, she's not ready for a relationship, but still wants to keep seeing me and take me out on a date next time. He says, I knew what this meant, that I was rushing shit. So I responded, it's all good, let's not rush or complicate things with labels, and just have a good time. When are you free? Yeah, I probably wouldn't have asked her out right after that. You notice he's kind of being a little robotic and coming back with things that he's learned from the book, almost like verbatim, like he's throwing lines at her, and he's trying to game things by using things he learned in the book instead of kind of feeling himself along. And this is the kind of thing that happens when you really haven't practiced this stuff a lot with women that you really like. She responded the next morning and said she would be free next Sunday, so I said I'd take her out and she could take me out next time. So notice that she's waiting to get back to him, which is further indication that her interest is dropping. A couple of days later, I became uncertain again, and I texted her, telling her how good I'd look with my head between her thighs, and told her to come over. She said she was on her period, LOL. The whole time, I knew I needed to back the fuck off because I saw how my over-pursuit was pushing her away. So I did. She reached out to me a couple of nights later and texted me good luck on the night of my band's show. She had to work and couldn't make it, she said. The day before our date, I got the dreaded, I can't hang out tomorrow, I'm so sorry. To which I responded, all good, when are you free again? So the right response would have been, because now she's breaking a date with you, I said, no problem, maybe next time. And I would have just left it at that. And then I would have waited at least a week to reach out again if I hadn't heard from her. So he says no response. He got no response to that. He said, I had a feeling my over-pursuing had turned this girl off to the point of no return. I texted her the next day saying, so again, he's just like losing it. Totally losing control. He says, I took time to think about it and make sure I'm making the right decision, and then I'm going to go back to seeing other girls. If you want to get together sometime, I'd love to hang out. But at this point, I'm not going to chase if my time isn't being valued. So, come on, man. Come on. That's just a bad, bad way to go. I mean, you basically told her that you're all butthurt and you're telling her about other women because you're thinking that's going to cause her to chase you and want you more. And it just looks bad. It makes you look manipulative. Makes you look butthurt. And it's just kind of like you're in a flat spin and you keep pulling back too hard and eventually you stall. You get a stall and now you're in a flat spin and you crash into the abyss. No return. He says, if you want to get together, you have my number. Hope you have a great week. She didn't respond, and it's been almost 3 weeks. I am taking time to work on myself through meditation and self-love, self-acceptance things, because I know I have a problem with being alone, which is why I rely on external things like women, drugs, and alcohol to make me feel validated. You definitely need to work on that, dude. Because you act this way, you're going to blow with every woman. And you had a really good opportunity. She was really into you. But, the good news is you could tell where you were going wrong, but yet you still failed to exercise emotional self-control. He says, I swear to God, I'm so torn over this girl and didn't know if I should fully let her go that I went to a fucking fortune teller in my town to see what she said. She said, this girl will reach out to me and my heart wants to believe it because I know that I am the one who blew this and was totally aware of it, yet I let my fears drive me to make mistakes. I have since hooked up with an ex and am talking to girls on Bumble to try to move on, but the thought of her haunts me, and knowing that I fucked things up and did shit I know better than to do. Did I fuck up by walking away, and should I have just waited for her response? Well, I pointed out where you've been pretty impatient, but at this point, what's done is done, what's said is said, and I would just let it be. You've pursued too much. You know, will you hear from her again? You could flip a coin, and I would say it's probably doubtful. Because you can only make so many mistakes before a woman rolls her eyes and goes, this guy doesn't get it. So let's go to the second guy's email. He says, hey, Coach, I met a girl on Tinder and created a spark followed by sexual tension before even meeting. We had a date involving a quick meal and a kiss. We agreed on the phone that the spark was real. We then spent the next 10 days on the phone and texting, which created even more sexual tension and attraction. A date was agreed for Friday. Way too much talking and texting on the phone. The phone is for setting dates, dude. When you talk and text too much, you typically talk women out of going out with you and liking you. You don't raise her interest over text. You raise it in person. Just like if you're in sales, you have to be face-to-face to sell your prospect. On Friday morning, she called off saying that a bombshell had been dropped on her. A guy she had major feelings for last year who didn't feel the same declared his feelings by calling her the previous night. That's why you don't talk and text too much. I called her and said she didn't feel anything for him and didn't want to meet him. I told her that I wasn't prepared to be put on hold while she tested the water with him. She told me she was interested in me, and we agreed to me going to stay at her place that night. So he was able to turn it around. She was all over me, so he stood up to her and says, hey, I'm not going to just sit around and wait be put on hold while you go explore your feelings with this guy. I wouldn't necessarily said that. I would just said, well, I think that's nice and everything, but if it was going to work out, it would have worked out a year ago. But you and I got plans, so let's keep a date and we'll see what happens. But at the end of the day, whatever he said, because he didn't go into detail, it worked because he got together. And obviously, the fact that she was all over him, that means that he said enough things that demonstrated his masculinity and his decisiveness and his certainty about himself and what he had to offer, and she obviously responded and found that very attractive. So despite that, he was still able to hook up with her. He says the sex was much more passionate and intimate than the hot sex we already expected. She cooled off during the week. I then called her and asked her to come for a ride on my motorbike the following weekend. She agreed. When I texted her to tell her I had arranged leathers for her and a helmet, I received this. Morning. I'm fine. How are you? I need to be honest. I had a great time with you, but I don't want to see you again. I'm not ready for a relationship. I've realized that although I speak quite openly and I don't want to be intimate with anyone yet, I feel completely cut off when it comes to sex, and that's not normal, at least for me. I need to do more to help myself get over what I've been through, and to do that I need to be alone. I'm sorry. I didn't reply and don't intend to. What the fuck? So confused, want to see her again. Well, too much talking and texting on the phone and not enough getting together and hooking up in person. I would have just said, hey, no problem, get in touch when you figure it out. And just wait to hear from her. And then a week or two or a few weeks later, a month later, whatever, more than likely it ain't going to work out with the other dude because it hadn't worked out before. And as she said, she didn't really feel anything, but the reality is if she disappears that quick, it's a combination of the over-pursuing and the fact that there's another guy that she used to have strong feelings for. So let's go through the last email. Dear Coach Corey Wayne, I'm a widower who has mourned his wife of 30 years for the past 5 years. I've recently begun to have strong feelings for a female friend that I have known since around the time of my wife's death. A wonderful friendship has grown during that time, and even though she has shown countless signs of attraction and interest towards me over the past few years, I have compassionately pushed her away, being still in my mourning period and not ready to move on to a new relationship. This last February, I decided to act on my recently realized feelings for her on Valentine's Day. Yeah, like I talk about in the book, it's like there is a process to the courtship. And what worked in this guy's favor is obviously this woman was interested in him for a period of time and he always pushed her away. And now that he's ready, you can almost kind of see the he's gonna vomit all his feelings and emotions on her, and if you've read the book, you know that typically doesn't work out too well. So this last February, I decided to act on my recently realized feelings for her on Valentine's Day. But the week before doing this, I dropped by her work unexpectedly in response to a challenge she made for me to find out where she works. I did this to test if she was still attracted to me or not, since as of late, she had grown colder towards me. Yeah, it's probably he became more interested in her as she probably after 5 years, maybe she met somebody else or started dating somebody else or had kind of lost interest. And then all of a sudden he's like, oh, this is my soulmate. I got to do something here. I got to tell her how I feel. And then showing up, it's kind of creepy and weird. You don't really do those kinds of things with people. She was impressed that I found her so fast, and her response on that day showed obvious signs of attraction. She was blushing, gave me a lover's hug. She said she was hot, temperature-wise, and then during the conversation outside her office, she touched my inner thigh 3 times, actions well out of her character. This encouraged me to make my Valentine's Day reveal, including with the bouquet of multicolored roses, a short but sweet note revealing my feelings towards her, a quote of Song of Solomon, 2 verse chat 2, I don't know which verse it's from. So he says, on Valentine's Day, after receiving the flowers, she texted a passive-aggressive thank you and now refuses to see or talk to me. I am very confused by this behavior. Well, obviously she wasn't as into you as you thought she was. I know that she's attracted to me, so it must be something I'm doing. You think? Or not doing that has caused this estrangement. I sense that this may be a test due to my rebuffing her for the last few years, but I'm not sure. There's a 19-year age difference between us as well. So she could just be put off by my advances at my age. No, it's just the way you went about it. The simple way would have just been to reach out to her and say, hey, why don't we get together and grab drinks sometime? It's been a while. We should catch up. Something simple like that. But obviously he noticed that she had been kind of distant and kind of cold at that point. And so if she's refusing to talk to you or text you, obviously she knows that now you're romantically interested. And if she's pushing you away, she's either A, not interested, B, got totally turned off by your behavior, or C, she's totally involved with somebody else and just didn't want to tell you because she doesn't want to hurt your feelings. And probably on some level, she might be thinking, well, where was this for the last 5 years? So the reality is, I wouldn't do anything. I would just wait to hear from her. And if she ever reaches out in the future, assume she wants to see you, invite her over to make dinner at your place and hang out, have fun, and hook up. And in the meantime, I would assume that she's unavailable or uninterested and just move on with your life. Because if she's refusing to see or talk to you, that should pretty much tell you everything you need to know, and just move on. Don't take it personally. Immerse yourself in 3% Man so you can learn the basics and the fundamentals, because vomiting your feelings all over somebody out of the blue like that after 5 years is just not the way to do it. It's you got to follow the progression that's in the book. So if you're in a similar situation or a situation that you're just trying to figure out and you'd like to get my help, you can go to my website, click the products tab at the top of your screen, and book a coaching session with yours truly. And until next time, I will talk to you soon.